All right, welcome back to Long Island's number one pro wrestler broadcast. Monty Nefaro, only seen here out of Indie Music TV on Long Island. And Jimmy, today's subject is how to create a pro wrestling gimmick. Jimmy, what do you think? How do you create a pro wrestling gimmick?
Well, the first question the Pharaoh has is who's creating the gimmick? Because that comes into play right away. You got to have somebody who actually understands the business. Not to get into the deep end of the pool right away, folks, but when you're creating a pro wrestling gimmick, you're going to have a lot better chance of someone who actually understands the product, is not a Hollywood TV writer. Yep, I'm taking shots already. And understands the case-by-case basis depending on the person and what kind of gimmick you want to go with.
Interesting.
So, it really depends. Like, for example, Goldberg. When Goldberg came through, he came through the WCW power plant. I'm sure they quickly realized he's not a talker. They took a look at him and he says, "But he's built like a brick poop house.
Right.
Let's go with that." And whoever was pulling the strings behind the creative character of Goldberg knew what they were doing. Because sometimes you have a guy who looks fantastic but can't talk. Now, in the old days, that used to be manager material,
right,
where they would have a manager to help get them over.
Right.
But in Goldberg's case, they just let it be. He went out there, he slaughtered people. He didn't need to speak. It worked for him. Then you have other crazy gimmicks. A guy like Mick Foley, not the sexiest looking body, not the most marketable looking physique like Goldberg, as we just were speaking about.
Right.
Mick Foley, with a basic everyday body, if anything, oversized and certainly not appealing traditionally the way champions were. He had the brilliance himself to realize, I'm just going to go the complete opposite route and not be the so predictable John Cena type and just be my reckless, wild self. Now, fortunately, Vince McMahon, again, getting back to who's pushing the gimmick, because it was mostly Mick who would come up with his own stuff. Credit to Mick Foley, the genius that he was, to realize what was best for him. But again, WCW never knew that. They never knew what was best for him. Vince McMahon knew. Again, it gets down to a couple of major key factors. Who's creating the gimmick? Who's pushing the gimmick? There's a lot of different ways you can create a gimmick. And from scratch, most of the time, most wrestlers sit in their basement when they're getting ready to wrestle at Comac High, and they look in the mirror and they say, what do I want to be? Right? And they make their own gimmick. Right? Most of the time. It really comes down to your timing. Was your gimmick good? Does it match you? I think that all the best gimmicks, the characters themselves, are extensions of the actual person. It seems to work most of the time. Even Ultimate Warrior might have been more like his character in real life than we think.
Right, sure.
If you know what I mean.
So it's almost like building a house, right? Trying to find out what the foundation
What's my
of this
foundation?
human being.
Good.
And let's work off that foundation.
Right.
And then start
Who's the architect
right,
of the building?
Right.
Vince McMahon, in this case, we were referring to. Yeah, sure.
And then building the gimmick.
Right. And all the little things that come with it. Knowing once your gimmick has arrived, what to do in the ring with that gimmick. We recently had Tonka Kid in the studio, and he knew to seize a moment and go into a certain little thing, and the crowd went nuts. You also have to know how to seize the moments with your gimmick, recognize when your gimmick is getting over, and more importantly, back in the day, how about recognizing when a gimmick is not getting over?
Very good. Yeah, good question.
My God, there's ways you can kill a gimmick, too. I've seen so many gimmicks fail. Most of the time it's because somebody from the outside, and this gets back to creative input with the wrestler, somebody from the outside didn't really grasp who this guy is and gave him a gimmick that just can't work.
Right.
And sometimes you're pigeonholed in gimmicks. Another bad idea is to usually not create a clone of something else.
How often does that happen?
I mean, my God, fake Razor, fake Diesel, that was doomed from day one.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's so many different ways to succeed at creating a great gimmick. How many different types of gimmicks have we seen? You can use your cultural background.
Yes.
I mean, Roddy Piper pushed his Scottish heritage to the hilt, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito, I don't know if they could do that today. I guess it's become more sensitive. In a way, it's a shame, because back then, nobody took it so personal.
Right.
It was all part of the spiel. It was all part of the Iron Sheik. Could the Iron Sheik exist today? It makes you wonder about the limitation on gimmicks today. You have a problem with one of the big stars as far as his gimmick because of the way he looks. Kevin Owens, you say he looks like your mailman.
But maybe that's his gimmick, though.
To look like your mailman? Oh my God, special delivery. But it really, but Kevin Owens is incredibly over. I think he was the first of this generation of wrestlers who wrestle very the way they do things nowadays, but he was the first guy who just looked regular, and now you have a million regular guys. So it's really not Kevin Owens' fault. You know, a gimmick can really rub off on the next generation and the generation after. You've seen gimmicks that have worked for years and years and years.
Right.
You know, but then there's other things that a wrestler has to recognize. Sometimes your gimmick can go stale, and you actually have to reinvent yourself. Hulk Hogan is the definition of reinventing a gimmick. Here's a guy who was over because he was a face and everybody rooted for him, and he was the all-American hero in Rocky III and all this other good stuff.
Sure.
And it got stale. So what does Hulk Hogan do? He looks in the mirror the same way that kid in high school looked in the mirror when he wanted to be a pro wrestler, and he goes, what do I got to do to change up this Hulkamania sour thing? Oh, how about a dark beard? And now I'll make myself look all sorts of menacing.
Right.
And now we've got Hollywood Hogan. You know, it's brilliant. It really depends on who's coming up with the idea, who's pushing the idea. And as I've said, that you can either massively succeed or fail horrendously. It's not easy.
Well, with that, that's called creating a gimmick.
There you go.
Thank you, YouTube. This has been Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh.
Oh, let's create an ending. Until next time, later.